We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic threw their plans against us.
Prior to your abduction, did you believe in UFOs or any sort of alien life form?
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All right, everybody, welcome back to All Things Unexplained. I'm Dr. Mounts, and we're back again, and Smitty Neves is joining me tonight. Smitty, how's it going tonight? You're muted, Smitty, so we did not hear what you're saying.
I'm good. I apologize.
Okay.
I just love her introduction. It's awesome.
It is a pretty cool introduction, and of course, the narrator, Larry, is the father of CJ Derringer, who is not with us tonight, but we're going to carry on and do the best we can. It will not be easy, but we'll see what we can do. CJ and I, by the way, had a very busy week, Smitty. Some of you may know. We went on the Fox 8 morning show this week and did a Halloween segment that was on Halloween morning. And you can find that on our website at bigfootufo.com. And just a little promo for myself real quick. I have got an Amazon number 2 new release out, the world's first Bigfoot pickleball book. Also the world's first children's pickleball book, and Amazon number 2 new release. You can find that on bigfootufo.com. Also, I just released Bigfoot Halloween Party. Halloween's over, but for us, Halloween's year round anyway. It's a counting book, and it's pretty popular, so check that out. But tonight, we are ecstatic to welcome, and let me put their logo up on the screen, Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich from the UAP-PD, located in Arizona. They are retired Arizona law enforcement officers with 59 years of combined experience.
Wow.
They present nuances of investigating UAPs as law enforcement professionals, including the hurdles that have kept UAP investigations from occurring. And I think most of our listeners know, but I feel like I should clarify exactly what UAP means. It's the new term for UFO. It stands for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. There are approximately 800,000 law enforcement officers in the United States. They work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They are seeing things, but they are not talking about what they're seeing. Marianne and Dave are here to tell us why and share with us some of the best UFO cases. Their mission with UAP-PD is to provide insight into unexplained phenomenon seen by law enforcement officers, many of whom have not spoken about their encounters due to the stigma put on them. Let's please welcome tonight from UAP-PD, Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich.
Yay.
Guys, welcome to the show.
Glad you're with us.
All right. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for having us.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, could each of you, Dave and Marianne, give us a little insight into your law enforcement backgrounds?
Well, I was a police officer in Arizona for 34 years. And during my time as an officer, I've worked patrol, I've worked arson. I was an arson detective, property crimes detective, also a narcotics detective. And of course, all my years as a police officer, I have spent, oh my gosh, all my years, maybe tens of thousands of interviews that I have done. About 7 years ago, I started with the organization MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network here in Phoenix. And what was neat about that is me being a police officer has helped me with doing MUFON field investigative work. And also, as a MUFON member, it has actually helped me in my police work. There was times that I've had a couple of different stories or different cases where knowing the people in the UFO community that had helped me get into these folks that just thought that nobody would understand what I'm going through or what's happening. And I'm like, yeah, I do, because of MUFON. And we kind of got into this UAP-PD to help other officers. Now, myself personally, I haven't seen anything while I was working on duty. And I haven't, but I want to help officers that have seen something. Now I'm going to let Dave Rich talk, because this is actually the reason we did start UAP-PD.
All right. So similar background in the respect that I was a police officer for a little over 25 years. Started in patrol like everybody else. I was in detectives where I worked narcotics, gangs, homicide, sex crimes, and ultimately ended up ending my career with the School Resource Officers Unit, which is unusual, but I have had an experience while I was working. It's an interesting experience, but more importantly, not only did I have this experience, I also felt the stigmas that Marianne and I talk about, which, like you mentioned, the hurdles that come up with when officers decide, do they want to come forward and speak about what they saw or do they not? In my case, it wasn't a UFO sighting, it was actually a paranormal sighting. With UAP-PD, we don't just stick to UFOs. In fact, we probably have more paranormal stories than we actually have UFO stories. But we believe in cryptids, paranormals, UFOs, because ultimately what our goal is when I had my experience, I basically got called upstairs and when you say called upstairs, it's usually not a good thing. I got called upstairs and basically was accused of lying about all of it, even though I had video, audio, evidence of what I had encountered and what I was researching and looking into. But I had a sergeant flat out accuse me of lying and making it up, which, as a police officer, when it boils down to it, everything that we do is based off of two things. And it's what evidence can we gather at a scene, and basically what is our credibility? Do people believe what we're saying is true? Because that's really the core of everything that a police officer does, is gather the evidence and then present it in a way that is believable and honest and trustworthy, because that's the way you want to represent yourself. So to have a sergeant look at me and accuse me of making up something when I had video evidence of it, audio evidence of it, was the first time in my life I actually worried about my career. And so at that moment, I was like, you're done. You don't talk about this. So I sat on this for 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. I sat on it. Did not talk about it to anyone. Didn't want anybody to know. There was a small group of people in the department that knew about it, but I never said anything because I was too close to retirement. I didn't want to, the ramifications of losing your job because somebody questions your credibility as a police officer is, like, they use the term career suicide. And that's what it is. Because if you get fired from an agency for something like that, you're never going to get hired by another agency. You're done. So basically, as UAP-PD, we came to the conclusion that we have officers who are seeing things and are in the same boat that I was in, where you had to keep it quiet. And that stuff kind of eats at you. sits in your heart and in your the pit of your stomach, and you've seen stuff that you want to so desperately tell people, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. I did the investigation. I looked into it. I ran down every possible lead and was left with, what is this? But you can't come forward and say anything because of your career. So what we've decided is that we're going to present a group that will meet with these officers, gather their stories in a safe environment, and be willing to take that bullet for them the way that we were willing to take the bullet in the real life when we were on the job. We'll take the stories from them. We will leave their names out of it, and we can present those stories in forums like this, in stage presentations, in different types of things, in books format, whatever we're going to do, but do it in an environment where these officers are getting the opportunity to get that off their chest. They're getting an opportunity to present it in a safe environment, and then they know that they're still shielded, they're still protected, because ultimately that's the why of what we're here for. Our ultimate goal is we want to help officers, we want to help first responders deal with a trauma, because every situation, everybody who has ever seen anything, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a firefighter, or whether you have nothing to do with being a first responder whatsoever, and you're just driving down the street and you see those lights in the sky, or you see that thing walking down the road, there is a level of trauma there. And it basically goes into the fact that in our brains, we're expected to know what things are. When you get confronted with truly the unknown, it causes that anxiety, that stress inside of you where you don't know what it is, and it weighs on you. And we wanted to help people alleviate that.
Right. It's probably very similar to fight or flight reaction. And guys, before we go any further, I need to interrupt just a minute. I think some sort of electronic device kicked on and it's causing some, it's reminding me of a refrigerator or something.
Yeah, we got it is Arizona, so it's still hot. So it's the AC unit that's outside here. Marianne's going to take care of it right now. Sorry about that.
Oh, no
it's
worry.
okay.
Our good friend of the show, Dane Beck, his dad is visiting down from Montana, and when he left Montana to fly down here, it was -4.
Oh,
Wow. Yeah, no, it's
I
I
wish it was.
I don't even think our thermometers go that low here in Arizona.
No. And a matter of fact, CJ, our co-host who could not join us tonight, she used to live in Arizona, and she would talk about, forgetting and leaving things in your car, and they would just explode, for example, or incinerate.
Oh yeah, you get a lot of melted stuff in your car.
Oh, absolutely. And
cars,
you were talking about the trauma and it of seeing something unexplained. And I know that police train for the fight or flight response, right, to a deadly situation. How does that contrast, that encountering something unexplained that you haven't trained for, as opposed with something that you have trained for, but that would, really frighten the normal population?
Well, part of our presentation is we go into this thing called cognitive dissonance, which is basically in a nutshell, it's you train to handle all these situations. So we go through police academies, we go through trainings after the academy, post-academy, we go through annual training all the time on how to handle all of these situations. So you go into this situation thinking, hey, I can handle this situation. And then you encounter that thing that you can't quite understand. And I can tell you exactly like what happened with my case. When I started the investigation, which I think you guys saw our presentation, right? You've seen parts of it?
Only just a little.
Just a little? Okay.
So please share.
Oh, it's a long one, but it's a
yeah.
So basically, at one of the high schools that I was working at, we got a 911 call at 11:54 in the morning, so just before noon. 911 operator answers the phone, says, 911, what's your emergency? She hears a voice that sounds like a girl, that's like a whispered voice, and it sounds like it says, I'm scared. And so the dispatcher says, what was that? And it repeats, I'm scared. She says, you're scared? And then it says, no. And then you hear clear as day the sound of the receiver being dropped onto the countertop. So obviously patrol gets responds to the scene. They search the entire building and they find nothing. They find the receiver on the phone, on the countertop. The officer picks it up and talks to the 911 operator. So we know for a fact it was this phone. And he talks to them. They hang up. He clears the entire building with the other officer. They don't find anyone. They go into the nurse's office, and he says, I couldn't tell you what it is, but something that we could not see rushed past us out the door. We literally felt it rush past us, but we couldn't see it. And we were standing right next to each other. So I get involved in the investigation because it's my school. So I have a copy of the 911 tape. I also have a copy of the security footage in that office while that happened. You see that phone is in the center of the screen, just up and to the right. It's not detailed enough to see the phone itself, but you can clearly see that at the time that that 911 call comes in, there is nobody at that phone. There is nobody in that building.
Wow.
And you see the officers come in. You see the officer pick up the phone, talk on it. You see the two of them go into the nurse's office, and a couple seconds later, you see the two of them run out looking like they're looking for something, and nothing came out. So
Now, is this a school that's currently open with children attending?
Yes. So I did a whole investigation. Now, the point that I was trying to get here is I told this story to my nephew years later, and he looks at me and goes, hey, Uncle Dave, weren't you scared? Because at the end, we couldn't explain it. And the only thing we could come up with, and I didn't finish it off, we ended up finding out that there was a nurse at the school who has been followed by a ghost her entire life. And we were able to equate it that it was that ghost that followed her to the school, because everything at her house stopped until I started poking around, and then it all started at her house again. But when I was talking to my nephew about it, he was like, well, weren't you scared? And I was like, well, no. And he's like, well, how could you not be scared? And because like every officer, we're trained to investigate these things. So up until I got to the very end, I was 100% convinced that I was going to find some logical, rational explanation for it. It was going to be like, oh, the phone call came in from one of the classrooms, or it was a crossover of a line, or somebody tapped into the line, or it was some sort of hoax. And every time I came up to the, oh, well, it has to be this, I would then find hard, fast evidence that I could not disprove that clearly showed it was not that. And it wasn't until I got to the very, very end when I was talking to the nurse and ended up finding the story about her being followed by this spirit that I was left with scratching my head going, holy cow, I think this is, I don't have an explanation. Because I never wanted to say, hey, I think it's a ghost. I was always like, I can't explain it. And then especially after that, when I got called upstairs and accused of lying, even though I had video, audio, all of the stuff, story from the nurse, the whole 9 yards, that was when I just shut it down, because at that point I was like, I can't lose my career over this. Right. But now that I've retired, I'm like, hey, no, we have an obligation to help these officers, these firefighters, any first responder who has seen anything. We really ask for them to contact us because we want to get their stories. We want to let them know that they have a safe place where they can recount these tales of what they're seeing, and we'll help them navigate through it. And if it's something that we can investigate, we're definitely going to go investigate it.
Do they seem to be responsive? I mean, have you had a lot of people respond to your call for these type stories?
We've had, it's been very streaky. We have had a lot of people, and then we have these kind of lulls where nobody comes forward. But when we get these people that come forward, it's really hard to describe. Like, we had a detective that came in and told a story, and when he sat down, and this is a guy that I worked with. He was with our agency. I worked with him for years. I had never seen him so uptight and like tense until he started talking about this topic. And then when he got done talking about it, you could see his shoulders relax. You could see that all of that anxiety that he was feeling inside had gotten out. And when I saw that, that was when I realized we're doing the right thing. And obviously I can't talk about his story. I told him I wouldn't talk about his story. But the fact is that there are officers like that, and we're getting them, and they come in and they tell us these stories, and you will literally see a physical change in their demeanor, because they get there and they do. In the back of their mind, they're like, I think I trust these guys, but... And one of the big things that usually ends up selling them I'm coming forward and talking is the fact that I look at him flat out and I say, I was you. I felt that. I know what you're going through. I know how it can be like literally worried about your family and your wife and your kids and or your husband if you're, whatever. The threat to your livelihood, to your future is real. And when I explain that to them, they usually tend to kind of be like, okay. And so like we just talked to a guy a couple days ago and it was the same thing. Like he's like, up until I got here, I was still thinking, I don't know if I really want to ring that doorbell. I don't know if I really want to show up. And then when we got him in there and he sat down and started to feel more comfortable, he was able to retell a bunch of stuff. And it was stuff that he admitted to us he had never told anybody.
Yeah, before. His family or anyone he's never told. Another thing is we are police officers and we are a brother and sisterhood. Even retired or not retired, we're all together in the, as we call it, the thin blue line. Somebody tells us a story, we're not going to ridicule them. We're not going to laugh at them. We're not, I mean, you get you TV shows out there that, oh yeah, that police officer, haha. That's not something that we do. And that's one thing is police officers, first responders can trust us because we are the law enforcement officers. And like he says, Dave's been through it. So he knows how these people feel coming to us. And again,
Right.
we tell folks they could remain totally anonymous.
Yeah, we will not talk. If you do not want us to tell
Yes.
anything, we will not talk.
Or you can identify yourself. So we do have one officer that
we've had hit and miss. We've
Yeah.
had one guy that absolutely wanted us not to say anything about who he was. He was like, I'll give you my story. I'll even take you out to where the place is. I just don't want my name involved. And we're like, absolutely.
Yep.
And then we've had the other end of the spectrum. We're like, dude, you can put my face out there. You can put my name out there. I don't care. I just want it out. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see the difference because it's.
Well, I think that and our research, I think that's a common theme, really. You have a lot of people who don't disclose anything due to the fright of being labeled, for lack of a better word, crazy.
Yep.
And people will just not say anything. That's been a common theme throughout our research and throughout this podcast. A lot of people stand in the background and don't reveal anything that they've actually seen paranormal wise.
Oh yeah, professional, well educated. What you would call normal middle class folks living in a neighborhood and raising kids, and nobody knows something that they've seen in the past, but maybe they'll come on the show and tell us. So I want to give a shout out to listener Blake Best. We're talking to Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich with the UAP-PD, and Blake Best says he has so much respect for you guys. A real life Mulder and Scully. The truth is out there. Marianne and Dave. And of course, CJ and I actually went as Mulder and Scully on the Fox 8 morning show this past Halloween morning.
Nice.
That was a great comment, Blake. And I would love to revisit real quick this elementary school or the school.
That was actually high school. It's
the high school. Yeah, that makes it a little better for me. I think if it's elementary school, it would be even creepier. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. But, when we talked to the folks from Skinwalker Ranch, we had the folks on from the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch and beyond the Skinwalker Ranch. They introduced this phenomenon to us that frightens CJ to this day. This phenomenon of the hitchhiker effect. And it sounds to me like that's kind of what you're referring to with this nurse, right? And I have to know, one, Dave, do you think that this hitchhiker effect kind of took hold on the school or just kind of was left behind, maybe waiting on the nurse, or what happened? And then two, this is for both of you. When you're dealing with anomalous phenomenon, whether it be UAPs or anything else, are you ever worried about yourself being in danger or of the hitchhiker effect or in any other way?
The first part of the question, I believe it followed her to the school. And the reason for it is she explained that during her entire life, it had been there. So she would move from one house to another house everything would be quiet for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks maybe, and then everything would start up at the house again. And it was your typical like haunting stuff. So she'd be alone in the first floor and she'd hear footsteps upstairs. She'd hear doors slamming. She has a dog and it would bark at the nothing in the corner. And so what I believe happened is it followed her to the school. It was at the school for probably about 2 or 3 weeks, because when I did research, I ended up finding out that 911 call was actually the third 911 call that we got at the school that we couldn't explain. But it was the only one where the audio was clear enough to actually hear the voice and understand what it said. So officers actually made entry into the building. And so what I think happened is it didn't like the fact that we were going around asking so many questions, and then it followed her back to the house. Because when I went and talked to her the first time, she didn't tell me anything happened. And it was one of those things where I had known her for years. I walked in and I kind of, hey, we had this weird thing happen. And the only reason I went in there is because the officers had gone into the nurse's office. And so I was just going to ask her if she'd ever experienced anything weird in the nurse's office. And her normal personality was very outgoing, very friendly, school nurse type personality, until I brought up that topic. And then everything shut down. She didn't want to say anything. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm a trained investigator. I can tell something is up. So I ended up leaving and then came back later that day. Same thing, very friendly, outgoing personality, until I brought up that topic, and then it shut down. And so then I was like, okay, well, we need to kind of give this a couple of days and then we'll reapproach it again, because now I know something's up. And it was the third time I approached her that finally she said, fine, I'll tell you. And she proceeded to explain it all to me. And I asked her, well, why did you not tell me like a couple days ago versus now where you're willing to tell me? And that was when she told me that 3 weeks ago, everything at the house had stopped. And for 3 weeks, she had no activity, no noises, no doors slamming, no nothing. But the night prior, everything started happening at the house again. So I believe it followed her back to the house because it didn't like the fact that somebody was asking too many questions. And so I believe that the hitchhiker theory, I think it really is. I think it's real. As far as us being concerned, I can't speak for Marianne, but and this may not be a popular opinion, but I have a faith. I am Christian. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. I believe that he put me here for this to help explain it, because without going too much religion, because you never want to talk religion, but in the Bible, if you believe the Bible, it mentions demons, it mentions ghosts, it mentions creatures that we can't explain. It also says that God created the heavens and the earth. It does not say that he made life on this planet and nowhere else. So when it comes to the hitchhiker mentality, I have yet to really fear that anything's going to attach, because I truly feel that I am taking steps to protect myself, protect my family, and I truly feel that what we're doing is for good. And I think that if we do what is right and we do it for the right reasons, I think there's a level of protection that we have, because we are of this world. Those things are kind of just visiting this world, which inherently I think makes us a little bit more grounded, a little bit more safe. Now, that's just my own personal take. She might have a different story.
I don't. I'm also a Christian, and after doing some of these investigations or some of these stories that people share with us, I don't feel that there was any type of hitchhiker effect whatsoever. I just got a very strong belief in the Lord, and I haven't had any encounters or any feelings of any bad paranormal or any bad anything evilness coming into my house. So not bragging or anything, but I feel protected.
Yeah, I think we do a good job of doing the right things and taking the precautions, because you'll go to a scene, and we've both gone to places, and you walk in and you're like, something's not right.
Yeah.
And I'm not a psychic or anything like that, and I'm sure somebody who is might be able to actually explain what it is that we're actually feeling. All we're feeling is kind of like the whole, this doesn't feel right. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know it doesn't feel right. But then when we leave, I never feel it like following us. It's like when we leave, we feel that we've left whatever it is
Yeah.
that has that's creating that feeling.
That makes sense. And I tell you what, I respect the fact that you guys take precautions. You know, I think it makes a lot of sense. And worst case, hey, better safe than sorry, right? And we may or may not circle back to that tonight, but I would say I would love to revisit the topic of religion and UAPs in the future sometime. Matter of fact, we're planning a roundtable discussion on exactly that, the potential correlation between UAPs and angels and demons and the biblical aspects of UAPs. So we definitely think that you cannot necessarily separate those things, right?
No, they're all related in one way or another. That's our philosophy. Is we call it the big three phenomena. So if you think of those, what do they call those? A Venn diagram, where you have the three circles. Yep. There's the paranormal, there's the cryptozoological, and then there's the ufology, and they all overlap. And one of the things that we bring up in that is like David Paulides. I'm sure you guys know who David Paulides is, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. He makes reference in his latest book and movie to the link between Bigfoot and UFOs and the missing people in UFOs. And then you have television shows like Terror in the Woods that make direct correlations between the supernatural, the paranormal phenomenon, and cryptids. And so the biggest one, the hardest one that we had to kind of link was, how do you get the spirit world and the UFO world linked together? And it was funny. I had a buddy of mine look at me and go, "Hey, did you see the video of the orbs that was on?" He told me about this video of orbs that was on the internet. And I was like, "Oh, orbs! Like, you mean like orbs in a haunted house, or orbs like flying in the sky?" And then I stopped and said, "Boy, you're an idiot. There's your link. You have orbs that are both orbs that are related to hauntings, but then there are also orbs that are flying in the sky that are related to UFOs." And so, exactly what you're saying, we firmly believe that all three categories are related and linked in one way or another. Don't know exactly how that link is, but we're convinced that they are related.
Oh, I fully believe it too. And I've written articles on this, and I would throw some other things into your Venn diagram too, because I believe that there's an intersection of science and religion in there as well. Like, we cannot separate these things. You know, Albert Einstein was looking for a theory of everything, and he started to discover things that really disturbed him. You know, he called them literally spooky things. He described spooky action at a distance, and he literally thought this is a very disturbing, spooky phenomenon. And Eric Bard from Skinwalker Ranch talked to us about how, hey, they've got all these anomalous phenomenon, and what he's looking for is some sort of commonalities, a common thread that can tie them all together. So it's exactly what you're talking about. So, and I feel real bad for you, Dave, on your experience with how they treated you about your encounter. I think the same thing's been happening with the military. And it's so sad, because you would think that police officers and military encounters would kind of be a gold standard of paranormal or anomalous encounters. And it's so sad that it's not. What do you think about that? I mean, shouldn't we be giving more respect to encounters by law enforcement and military personnel?
What's interesting about you say that is, okay, the government came out, disclosure, hey, we're not going to fire you, we're not going to discipline you if you come forward and tell us a story that you saw something in the sky while you were, up in the air or whatever. It's not the government we're worried about. It is our other police officers, the people that you work with. What they do is you tell a story like Dave. Okay, what did he have on his locker? He had a tinfoil hat. He was laughed at. He was a bumper sticker, I honk for grays. That's the problem, is it's the people that you work with are the ones that ridicule. And I'm not a pilot, so I can't say, but I could almost guarantee that the pilots out there, if they came forward and said, yes, they saw a light in the sky, that wingman that he has is like, I'm not going to fly with him. What is he going to do? See a light in the sky and take off after the light instead of focusing on whatever mission they're on? They're not. So I think that stigma is going to be with police, with military, at least with the foreseeing future, that it's going to continue.
One of the things, like you're saying, is you're entirely correct with your assessment of, you would think this should be the gold standard for witnesses. And that's part of what we talk about, and part of what we in UAP-PD are trying to do is, if you think about it, part of our thing is like, what is a police officer? So they're a highly trained observer who is taught to control their emotions, taught to walk into a situation, assess all of the possible outcomes, and remain impartial. That's like a fantastic witness for anything, whether it's a paranormal sighting or somebody just stole your car. That is the greatest witness you could ever get. And that's why, as UAP-PD, like, we love talking to law enforcement and first responders, because your witness has such a high level of credibility that anything they say, you know, it has already been looked through. Because if a police officer was driving through a field late at night and he sees a light in the sky and he's like, oh, what is that? And he looks at it and he ends up finding out that it's a crop duster, which we still have here in Arizona. He's not going to bother coming forward and tell us. Why? Because he already looked at it and said, well, what am I going to do? Go and tell him, hey, I saw these lights in the sky, and guess what? I found out it was an airplane. No. These first responders and military, fire, police, they're already trained on how to look at stuff and how to figure out what is normal and what is abnormal. And so that makes the best witness. And you're right. And going off of what Marianne said, and kind of like what you touched on earlier, with the government, we're not really too concerned about. It's society on a whole. And I think, quite honestly, there's a tipping point that I think we need to reach. Because we've encountered officers that are on the reservation, and they have come forward and told us stories. And when we talk to them about the stigma that I faced and the stigma that other officers faced, they can't believe it. They're like, what do you mean that people are making fun of you? What are you talking about? And as near as we can figure out is, if you look at some of the different cultures, like the Native American culture here in Arizona, spirits, star people, cryptids, they are as normal as like an average everyday encounter with when you're not on the res. So when you see somebody and an officer says, hey, I saw Bigfoot walking down the side of the road, and you have a group of people that live on the res, they're going to be like, well, yeah, that's no big deal. Yeah. But the moment you step off of the reservation, you step out into like one of the municipalities here, you say something, now they all look at you and they go, well, that's ridiculous. You're crazy. You didn't see that. You saw something different. And it's because their culture, their society, it is such a big part of their society that it's accepted. So like two of our friends that we're really good friends with are John Dover and Stan Milford. I don't know if John Dover's been on Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, stuff like that. They were just here with Antonio a few minutes ago. They just left. They're all down for the MUFON.
Oh, that's right.
But John and Stan, like, we've talked a lot about that, and they've explained on how it is such an integral part of their culture and of their story of how they became, that the idea of walking into a room and saying, hey, I saw a ghost, they're all just like, well, yeah, okay. It's like saying I saw a bottle of water, or the dog just walked into the room, or something like that. But when we get away from that, the society off of the reservations and away from that, where it's not part of their culture, they still struggle with the idea of, if I say, he says he saw something, and I say, oh yeah, that's fine, now I'm going to get laughed at too. So now not just him, but I'm getting laughed at as well. And nobody wants to get laughed at. And so my personal belief, and I think Marianne's as well, is if we can get society to the point where they accept that it's more than likely that this is real, is when we're truly going to see differences, and we're going to be able to see military, law enforcement, firefighters, the average person on the street, when they say they see something, people are going to not laugh anymore. They're going to look at it and go, well, let's talk about this and look at what was that. Because the reality is every one of these sightings, they could be something. And it might be a case of misidentification. It might be something that is easily explained if we look into it. But if nobody ever comes forward and says it, we're never gonna know. Because like I said, I mean, some of our investigations, we ended up finding out that it was nothing more than either a hoax or some sort of misidentification. And that's kind of what we're about. We're not here blindly saying that all of this stuff is real, but we do believe that everything that gets reported should be looked into and see, is it something that is
Right.
mundane and normal, or is it something that could be something that we can't quite explain?
You know, that's also at the heart of what gives you guys validity, right? That the fact that you will put in the research, and if there's nothing to it, hey, there's nothing to it. Let the data bear out the facts, right? And there's no need to speculate. We can collect data and we can make conclusions that way, the scientific method. And I think that gives you guys a lot of validity there. So we're talking to Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich from the UAP-PD. We're so thankful to have you guys here with us tonight. And by the way, you can support our show at BigfootUFO.com. Marianne and Dave, how can folks find out more about your organization, the UAP-PD?
Well, we do have a website. It's UAP-PD.com. You can go on there and see what we're all about, what our mission is, and also a little bit of information about us ourselves. But also, if anyone would like to contact us, it's called UAPpolice@gmail.com. Contact us, and I'll give you a call back right away. And we would love to hear stories. And we will literally go anywhere in this country. Now that we're retired, we can travel a little bit more, but okay, well, I'm really retired. He's still kind of sort of working. But we would go anywhere to contact these folks. If they just want to be a Zoom meeting and we just talk on the computer, we could do that. We can talk on the phone. Or if anyone would really like to come and tell their story in person, we would have no problem doing that. UAP-PD.com. We do have a little link on there. It says contact us. So they can do it that way. And within the day, we will contact the person back right away. But that's our two biggest ways for people to contact us.
I think that's great.
Let me ask Dave a question. During your experience with all of this doubt, did you ever start thinking to yourself, well, maybe I didn't see exactly what I thought I said, just because of the amount of pressure that was put on you by all the other law enforcement officers?
Yeah, I did. Because there came a point, and it's interesting you asked that, Smitty, because nobody has ever asked me that. But there was a point where I was like, am I crazy? Was this nuts? But the thing that I had going for me was I had the audio recording and I had the video recording. So every time I started to think, maybe I'm mishearing it, I would play the audio and listen to it again and try and listen to it and go, am I really hearing that? And you can't deny it. It's that clear. I actually had some friends from MUFON that actually analyze it, and they actually were able to amplify it. And when you hear the amplified version, it is as clear as day. And it is intelligent because it responds. Because one of the things that I forgot to tell you guys is when the call came in, the 911 operator says, 911, what's your emergency? The voice says, I'm scared. She says, you're scared? And it says, no. Well, when we amplified the audio and I finally got to hear it amplified, we found out that it doesn't actually say, I'm scared. It actually says, I scare.
Whoa.
And so then when it says, you're scared, it says, no, and then drops the phone. So
there's a
that
big difference.
Is intelligent response that you can hear clear as day. And so in answer to your question, yeah, there was a time when I was like, did I really hear that? And then when I got the amplified version from Jim Mann, a friend of ours that we work with that was here at MUFON, there was no denying it anymore. And then I go back and look at the video and I'm like, I know they went in there, and what are they running out looking for? And I'm looking at the video of where that phone is, and there were 3 sets of motion detecting lights and none of them go off when this 911 call comes in. And as soon as the police officers walk in, all of them start popping on. It's like there's no way in the world anybody was at that phone when that 911 call came in.
Wow.
Yeah.
I tell you what, William Shatner never took a case like this on Rescue 911. I don't know if y'all remember that show. He never had a case like that. But what a great story. I tell you what, that is truly disturbing. And you guys, if you're up for it, speaking of traveling, I would love to present some historical law enforcement UFO encounters from
Sure.
your files. And I've got a couple of surprises in there for you as well. So the first one I want to pull up, let me get this on the screen here.
That's a good case. I like that.
That's a great
wait,
case.
isn't that awesome?
Hey, look at those guys.
That's a great case.
That's Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich from UAP-PD. And
This is all
so
yours.
I've heard there's a story to be told about a UFO encounter with law enforcement in Lumberton, Robeson County, North Carolina, 1975. And of course, CJ and I are in deep Chatham County in central North Carolina, Robeson County, not that far away.
Well, let me tell you, this case was actually the late Lee Spiegel's case. This depiction that you have up there, the drawing, that was a drawing, and Lee Spiegel was one of the gentlemen that you see that's underneath that light. That's the really awesome thing about this case. Now, this case actually happened. It happened in 11 different cities in several counties, dealing with over 29 police officers in 4 nights. Now, if I went through this case with you right now, we would at least be, oh my gosh, almost an hour trying to explain, because it started in Lumberton, and 3 police officers from Lumberton PD saw it hovering over a water tower behind the high school. So it went from there. It then shot off to another town that was in, I believe it was Robeson County, and that police officer saw it. It then went, and I don't have the specifics on all the counties, but it hit of one whole night. It hit about 3 different counties. And what was very unique is North Carolina has a bunch of counties, but this triangle, and they all said it was a triangle shape with the lights, just like you see on that picture, the lights underneath the V-shaped craft, and it was silent. Sometimes it went very slowly over them. Sometimes it shot off like a bullet. But every officer said the same thing. They described the same craft. They described the same lights, and they described that it had no sound whatsoever. All 4 nights of this thing, during the day, of course, it was gone. But then right as, say, about 2-3 o'clock in the morning, boom, it was back again, and they'd be chasing it. It only went several counties. And if we had a map of North Carolina, these 7 counties are, I would say, the lower east side of North Carolina. They thought it was heading south. So one of the dispatchers contacted South Carolina and says, hey, watch out, this craft's coming your way. Never came. It never went any further to the west, to the east, or to the north. Every night it stayed right in these 7 counties. It was seen, the first night was seen over a water tower. On the, I believe it was the middle of the 3rd night, it was seen in a different county over a water tower. So you kind of got to wonder, is it getting its power from the water tower, the water source? I don't know. But what I tell people, which I think is funny being cops, is that I believe that the teenager aliens took their mom and dad's V-shaped craft and were joyriding around in these 7 counties and having all these cops follow them, but can never catch them. So I always kind of say that, but it was very interesting. But Lee Spiegel actually, it went back into the Lumberton area, and he was able to finally chase it around with some law enforcement officials, and they were actually able to get basically underneath it, just like you see in that photo. Again, it's about 4 days. It was sporadic, maybe a couple of days later, but then all of a sudden it was gone. But it was just one of the most interesting cases. And I know there's other cases that police officers, different agencies have followed and chased a craft. However, this one was the most significant, having over almost 30 police officers, several counties, and 11 cities in 4 nights. That was so interesting about that case.
That is wild. A multi-night event. It's the artist depiction. It's a triangular craft with some lights around the edges. It really reminds me a lot. Our military consultant, Mr. J, when he was living right down the road from me, I'd say 1.5 miles. At some point in that house, he had an encounter with a triangular craft, silently, slowly went over his house, killed all the electronics that he had, cell phones, cameras, everything, and then boom, it was gone. So totally reminds me of that. I would love to have you guys back on sometime. Maybe we could do a show just on this encounter. I think that would be fascinating, especially since it's literally right down the road from us here in central North Carolina.
Definitely.
That would be terrific. Smitty, do you have something to say on that?
I was just going to say that would be neat. The whole thing about the law enforcement reminds me of our first podcast.
Oh yeah, and we're going to get into that here on another slide. And there it is.
Florida, Mississippi.
So our very first podcast was with an anonymous law enforcement witness from this very famous case from 1977, Florida, Mississippi, where over a dozen law enforcement officers followed this.
It was over 2 dozen.
Oh yeah, over 2 dozen law enforcement officers from different branches, right? I mean, it was highway patrol, it was sheriffs, it was all kinds of different.
It was local deputies, city deputies, sheriff's department, highway patrol. You want me to just tell them about it?
Yeah, because Smitty and I are connected to this case because we both grew up in Mississippi, and this case happened in rural Mississippi.
Yeah, the man that we talked to, we call him Mr. Billy. Well, he'd been having these encounters with UAP since the mid-50s. And one night he's in his house, I believe it's around 9:30 p.m. Somebody knocks on his door and tells him, says, what you've been seeing is out in this cotton field. Come follow me. Well, he gets in his patrol car and he follows one of the deputies out there. The deputy stops. He's too frightened to continue on because he's already saw what was in the field. So Billy goes out there, and about 25 to 30 feet off the ground is what he described as a UFO, and it looked like 2 antebellum bells that had been turned upside down, or one turned upside down, and they'd been welded together in the middle, and at the center was portholes to where you could see light on the inside of the craft. And it sat there for 35 to 40 minutes. Wow. And then said that 2 of the off-duty police officers got in their truck, went toward it, it would back away, and then they saw a glowing red light in the center of it underneath, and they turned and went the opposite direction. It moved back into position where it had originally been. And after that, it took off to, I believe, the northwest at a high rate of speed, and it just continued to go up and hundreds of feet, and eventually disappeared. Well, they chased it on down the road there for a little bit. But this is like one of the most witnessed UFO sightings in American history.
Yeah, well documented. Also left physical evidence on the ground. And Mr. Billy, y'all, he shocked us with a revelation too. I say it was well documented, so some of this stuff, was in the public domain, but he told us something that was never in any news article about it, never in the public domain. He said the very next day, the sheriff's office got a call and they wanted to talk to somebody about this incident. And they said, well, here, we're going to let you talk to Billy about it. And it was one Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Wow.
Nice.
Excellent.
Calling Mr. Billy. And not only did he call him and talk to him about this, he had some quite, stunning revelations that he revealed to Mr. Billy. He wanted to know, hey, is it around an atomic power plant? And he told Mr. Billy, we have this theory that they harness the power of gravity to move about. And then, of course, we've heard more about that in recent years from folks like Bob Lazar and other sources. So quite an amazing story for us to have as our first ever episode. That was over 3 years ago and over 300 episodes ago. Not only that, but you know what? It taught us the existence of the UFO rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because with this one case only, I essentially had to buy a new external hard drive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the more I dug, the more it just kept going and going and going. And y'all, it was never going to stop. You remember that, Smitty?
Oh, yeah. And then one of the things that also is interesting, that one of the police officers that was there that night, the CIA contacted him, and he would just basically acted as like that incident never happened after that. He wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't say anything.
Oh, yeah.
And so we just kind of left Billy hanging out to dry when it came to discussing what they had witnessed. But
yeah, and you talked so much about the stigma, and it was applied to this case.
Oh, yeah.
In exact same fashion. They'll still talk about it amongst each other, but not really to anybody else. And even Mr. Billy, who had nothing to lose or gain, he still did not feel comfortable, using his real name and go. And this was in 1977.
Yeah. You just wish we had body cams back in 1977.
Oh, yeah. And, he was as believable and rational and intelligent of a man as you could speak to. But the stigma still went with him, not only for him, but he would not use even the names of the other law enforcement officers, right? Like he would allude to them, like what their title was, for example. But he was very cognizant of their sensitivity to having their names put out there about this, even, all these years later. So our next slide here that we wanted to get your insight on, the Royal Canadian Police case in 1978.
Clarendon, Newfoundland. So up in Canada, they have UFOs up there too. So this is a case involving a Canadian Mountie by the name of Jim Blackwood. He was actually received a call to go out to the bay in Clarendon, where there was an object seen hovering about 100 feet above the water, right out there in the bay. So he gets there. There are multiple witnesses that are there. He's looking at it. It's there for a rather extended period of time because he had enough time to go get a telescope, bring it over and look at it. And he described it as being like a dull metal color, but it had lights on it. It was like red and blue lights. And so it was hovering there, and there were basically all these people looking at it. So he tries to come up with a way of interacting with it. So he angles his patrol car so that he's pointing at it, and he turns the headlights on and off as a way to kind of signal it to see if there's any type of response. And in response to him shining his lights on and off, the craft shines lights back at him. So it's showing intelligence, kind of like with your case where it was moving when the cars were coming closer. It's obviously displaying some sort of intelligence. After a while of them trying to interact, they don't really have any other contact with it per se. It flies up and takes off. Now, a couple of things happen in this. After it took off, it was caught on radar in a nearby radar station. There were multiple witnesses. So they end up having an investigation into it. The government in Canada investigates it, and they try to say that it was Jupiter, that they all saw Jupiter, which really confuses me because the last time I checked, Jupiter wasn't 100 feet off of the bay, shining lights back at people at it. And I've never known Jupiter to show up on radar here on ground. So obviously they're coming up with a story. Two last things about this. One that I think is absolutely great, and one is, in my opinion, absolutely tragic. The thing that's absolutely tragic is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police admin told Mountie Blackwood that he needed to go and talk about this topic. So they basically ordered him to go provide a statement to the media about what he had witnessed. In our presentation that we do, we actually have a clip of his recounting of what it was. And after that case, after that incident where he had to report it, his entire career took a downward turn. And when asked about it afterwards, he basically said it was the worst mistake he's ever made in his life. And the part that really frustrates me and I think is tragic is that wasn't a mistake. He was ordered to do it by his supervisors, and his supervisors basically left him out to dry. And that is going into the stigma of, as officers, we don't want to encounter this. We don't want to talk about it because we have no recourse or nobody to fall back on, because our admin, our supervisors, they're not going to back us. And it was just like that with Mountie Blackwood. He was basically left hanging. The only positive thing to come out of this is the local hockey team changed their name to the Clarenville UFOs. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Oh, wow. Well, I tell you what, it's just sickening what the officer had to go through there. And it totally reminds you of, current times with UFO whistleblowers. We have David Grush here coming out as a UFO whistleblower, literally filing a claim with the intelligence community, attorney general or inspector general, right? And not that long after he comes out and testifies before Congress, lo and behold, a reporter is given a tip for the specific county to FOIA the police about an incident with David Grush, and it's all over the news, right? So the smearing campaigns, the psyops, it continues even to this day, and it's really sad, and it's really heartbreaking too.
There is a true threat to anybody coming forward to speak of the truth, and that's why we feel it's important to take anybody who is brave enough to come forward and at least listen to what they say and at least look into it the best that we can, because they're owed that, because they are taking a risk in coming forward and saying something, and we owe it to them to take it seriously.
Absolutely. You know what I think it speaks to? Guys, I think it speaks to the fact that, like we said, police reports and military reports, they really should be part of the gold standard. And I think that the general public does recognize that. And it is because of that, that's one reason why they are discredited and put through this humiliating process, because their word does carry so much weight, with the general public. So I think an informed public is one of the greatest enemies of our government entity and our military as well. So very disturbing trend there. Well, our next incident here, Smitty, did you have something else on that?
I was just going to say, I think, too, our society is taught not to question the standard or the norm. So when people do, they tend to stigmatize them as to, their sanity or if they really saw what they did, because we're taught to just take everything for face value, even though that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and our next case, Warren, Minnesota, 1979, Val Johnson's squad car case, and we have a police vehicle here that sustained damage during a UFO encounter.
Oh, this is a really good one. Back in 1979, Deputy Val Johnson was driving down the highway. It was about 1:40 in the morning. He looked off to his left and noticed that there was a bright light about 3 to 4 feet in diameter that was just above the roadway. Well, he was thinking, okay, could it have been a truck crash? Could it have been an airplane down? He had no idea what it was. Makes a left-hand turn, heads down to on the highway 220. And as he's driving toward that light, all of a sudden, that light jumped through his windshield and hit him, as he called it, a 200-pound pillow. He
Wow.
was out for about 30 minutes, and we actually have his radio transmission. That's when we do our talk, we let people listen to his radio transmission. And he basically tells dispatch, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on. First responders get there. They take him to the hospital, and the doctor says that both of his eyes were burnt, and they described them as arc welder burns to his eyes. And his whole jaw was, his teeth were fractured at the gum line.
Knocked out.
So that's why when you hear the
Sorry.
transmission, it's kind of very
Hard to understand.
yeah, garbly, because his teeth were fractured. He went after while they did the investigation on the roadway, and as you can see on what would be the right-hand picture is his patrol car, that it rolled about 385 more feet after he was unconscious, and it came to rest in a 90-degree angle in oncoming traffic. He had no idea what in the world happened. On the left-hand side picture, that is his patrol car. And his patrol car, I don't know if it's still there, but back in 1979, and I don't know how long, but that was actually in the Historical Society in, I don't know if it was Warren County? Okay.
Their museum.
Yeah,
Historical
so-
museum.
And if you look at the damage to his car, it went basically on the driver's side, approximately maybe a foot to 2 feet in diameter. It hit the headlight, went over the hood, went straight up over the driver's windshield. It hit the light bar, and it went straight down and hit a couple of the antennas and bent his antennas. His car clock that's inside the car and his wristwatch were in sync 14 minutes behind what the time actually was. So he had stoppage of time at that point too. He had no idea what was going on, and the engineers came out from Honeywell to go do some type of testing on it. And they went, well, there's got to be some type of magnetic force that hit it. And then they said, well, actually, a thing must have collided with the patrol car. That was their
Very
technical.
Very
Yes.
technical.
Yeah.
So,
Very
but
technical.
to this day, nobody has no idea what it was. And the sheriff, Val Johnson sheriff, totally believed what happened, his story of what happened to him that night.
Wow. And, I think this just goes to show you that people in the know about UFOs and UAPs understand that this phenomenon has affected people on many different levels. And one of them is physically. It has affected people physically through injuries and other physical situations. And what makes it sad is that, and we probably won't have time to get into this organization tonight, but AARO, the All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, right? They basically say, hey, we don't know of any cases where UAP encounters have led to physical situations with the people that encountered it. And the people in UFO UAP community are like, wait, what? Why do you not know? We know. I mean, here's a great example of a case, and this was in 1979. So imagine how many more there have been since then. Fascinating case.
No doubt.
And our next and last historical encounter. It's not really a historical encounter, but it is law enforcement encounter from this year. So I had to throw this one in there for y'all. A little bit of a curveball. This captured the world's attention. And so it was a UFO encounter or situation that involved police officers. And it was on two fronts, really. The infamous backyard in Las Vegas UFO report. So it started with apparently a police traffic stop, and there really was some sort of celestial phenomenon that passed through the sky that the police officer recorded, I think unawares, by the way, on his body cam. I'm not sure the police officer was actually aware that he captured that. And then I believe it was the same night there was a 911 call, and we've had a 911 call tonight already. Another 911 call, and the guys are like, "Hey, UFO crashed in our backyard. There's aliens. They're like 9 to 10 feet tall. Send help." What do y'all know about this case?
I would take this one here.
Well, we actually have some friends that work in that area. And while we have not completed an official investigation in it, we're getting some pretty disappointing answers. You guys, we mentioned Mark D'Antonio already tonight, who's a friend of ours. He's one of the video and photo analysis specialists for MUFON. He actually looked at the body cam footage from the one patrol officer that was out on the traffic stop when the green light flashes in the sky. And he is pretty convinced that it is a meteorite that is coming through and not actually an actual craft. So we got that information. Again, like I said, we're still kind of investigating, but we did come across some information from some people who may or may not have been in the backyard. And they emphatically deny that there was anything in the backyard. Now, again, like, we have not seen body cam footage of this. We haven't seen anything like that because of privacy rules. In a backyard like that, you're not going to be allowed to have that type of stuff broadcast because it's private property. But the sources that we have talked to are very, very reliable and credible. You mentioned earlier that, like, we will look into things, whether they are true or not, because we want to get to the bottom of it one way or another. We have had a number of investigations that have unfortunately taken or capitalized on the popularity of UFOs in an attempt to make a name for themselves or try to establish credibility for something. And we were able to clearly prove that it wasn't the case. One of the ones that I told you about before we went on was a case that I investigated where the person reported this flashing light that they had video of was supposedly a UFO that was outside of his house that he had on video. Unbeknownst to him, we have a lot of technology that we can actually amplify the lighting in rooms. We can amplify a lot of the video that we get back. And we were able to amplify it enough to clearly see that what he had done was actually taped a light to a ceiling behind a ceiling fan, turned on the ceiling fan, and then filmed the light being obstructed by the blade as it went by, tried to claim that it was a UFO. I'm not saying that that's what happened in this case, but because we're not done yet, but the information that we're getting right now is highly, highly, highly suspect.
Right. And I tell you what, this really exemplifies one of the reasons why organizations like Marianne Robb's and Dave Rich's UAP-PD is so important, because the mainstream media basically does nothing but pick up on stories that somebody else ran, right, with essentially already little to no research, and then they do put no research whatsoever into it, except they just run it again, and it perpetuates around the globe, and then it's done. The next day, it's forgotten about, and it's basically written off as the truth. Like, whatever the first person in the chain wrote, that's the impression that's left in everybody's mind, forever on that. And I think it's up to organizations like yours, like the UAPD, to dig more into these cases, because if you don't do it, there literally wouldn't be anybody else out there doing it. We at this podcast have debunked, big time news stations who have claimed to have an exclusive report. And through just a little bit of sleuthing, we determined, no, that's from a documentary from 1998. This is not an exclusive in 2023. We're sorry. We won't call any names, but you can look at our social media and see some of those examples. But guys, I just applaud you for the research and the effort and the work that you put into these cases. I think it's very important. I think it's adding actual science to the field of knowledge here. And we thank you so much.
Your law enforcement service.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I'm a
Absolutely.
teacher. I'm a teacher, and I feel much better now that we have a full-time SRO on campus. Yeah. So it makes things a lot better for us, a lot safer.
Yep. And we have so much more we would love to talk about, but if it's okay, we would love to get your hot takes on just a few topics real quick. So just your quick hot takes on some topics that might be of noteworthiness to our listeners. And then we'll close it out for tonight. And we would love to have you back on with us because we have so much more to talk about. And you know what? This UFO, UAP topic, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So there's going to be lots more to talk about for quite a while now. But guys, I would love to get your hot take on the Keystone event of them all in ufology. Roswell, New Mexico, 1947.
My personal take on that is this. There's a lot of evidence there. There is a lot of evidence there. Hot take, I think something happened. There's just way too much evidence to say that it wasn't. And there's way too much evidence to have basically faked it, if you know what I mean. Like, we have multiple crash sites, we have debris, we have multiple witnesses, multiple locations. There's just too much there for me to consciously say that nothing happened. Now, was it a UFO or was it a piece of our technology that was advanced that we don't understand? That I don't know, but I don't think it was a weather balloon, I'll tell you that much.
That's kind of how I feel. I kind of match it up to, say, the Phoenix Lights here in Arizona, 1997. Phoenix Lights happened. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people saw this V-shaped craft go over the Phoenix area. Police officers, first responders. There was an actor that was in a plane coming from California to Phoenix. He saw it. Yes, he saw it.
Yeah.
Dick Plissken. But Jack Burton.
But what happened there? The government really quick put up some jet fighters up there and sprayed some flares. And so, oh no, you just saw flares. That's what I think happened at Roswell. Yes, there was a crash. Whether or not, again, could it be a UFO? Could it be any type of government technology that was not supposed to be out there and it just crashed? But what did they do? They put the weather balloon out there and they told the military guys that actually saw this, they told them, no, you're going to tell this story. There is so much going on. Even as of today, the folks from Roswell, I was just there a few months ago. Again, if this was just a fake story or whatever, it's not going to be, what is it now, 75 years? They would not be still talking about this crash. So, yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, quite interestingly, a little bit later in the same year, we had the formation of the CIA and the Air Force. Very interesting, right? Nothing to see at Roswell, but we think we might need this thing with CIA and Air Force to kick into gear, just in case. So, and, of course, the governor of Arizona had that mockery of a press conference, talk about stigma and psyops, where he ran out this dude dressed up like an alien and basically mocked all the witnesses of the Phoenix Lights and just immediately casted into the category of parody, right?
Interesting side note on the Phoenix Lights is we have 2 police officers, one sheriff's deputy and one Mesa PD
Yes,
officers that have both come forward that they were working on the night that it happened and gave us stories and statements of what they saw on the night that they were working. So, we have credible law enforcement officers that witnessed it on that night who have come forward and talked about it. So again, going with the gold standard of what our witnesses are, we got 2 different law enforcement agency officers who witnessed it.
Now, you do talk to law enforcement officers about other anomalous phenomenon besides UFO and UAP. What's your hot take on the granddaddy of all cryptids, Bigfoot, and is there a correlation between Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings in your experience?
I've never have, of course, had an experience on that, but talking about the Bigfoot, I think they come from another dimension. That's why we have not been able to find any type of evidence. If bears, deer, elk, or anything else, you're going to find a carcass. You're going to find some scat. You're going to find some kind of hair. You're going to find something. And there hasn't been anything of a Bigfoot that has been found, any type of evidence. My thought when you're talking to people that have seen the Bigfoot, they said they see it maybe 2 or 3 or 4 feet, and then all of a sudden it just disappears. To me, it's going back into their dimension. It's going through a portal. It's going back into their time. The UFO, I know David Paulides talks about the missing people. He does talk about Bigfoot, and he also talks about the UFOs. If you want to take over on that.
The UFO and the Bigfoot thing, I have my own unique perspective on it, and I don't know if you want to hear it or not.
No, absolutely.
Okay, so in your mind, do me a favor. Picture a highway going down the road. Picture another highway intersecting it. It goes over it, goes under it, whatever. So you got an overpass there. What if we're all driving down the highway and Bigfoot is driving on the other highway? And we go under that, we cross those 2 highways at the same time. So while we're driving down the road, minding our own business, and we're not at the overpass, we're not going to see anything. But as we get close to the overpass, we'll see him until we leave that area again. Isn't it interesting that there have been documented cases where there will be a field of snow, footprints of a Bigfoot will appear out of nowhere, not come out of the woods, like right in the middle of the field. They will go for like 100, 150 yards and then disappear. Not at a tree line, but in the middle of the field. So unless Bigfoot got dropped by a helicopter, walked for 150 feet, and then jumped up and flew out on the helicopter again, there's no logical explanation for how those footprints appeared and then disappeared. And so that's why I personally believe that Bigfoot is an interdimensional type thing. And what we're seeing are these moments where our world and his world kind of intersect. And then you'll look through, and I feel personally that this also explains a lot of things, like paranormal phenomena, like residual hauntings, stuff like that, where we're just taking a glimpse into another area because for some reason we're at a crossroads where we can see it. And then as we keep on going by and we keep on our way, we lose sight of it, just like we lose sight of that overpass that we just went under, where we saw what was on that other highway. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, or it might just be crazy. I don't
Makes
know.
as good a sense as a lot of other things and theories we've heard on it. So I think it's a pretty good theory, Dave. So I appreciate that. And my last hot take for you tonight, I don't know if it involves any law enforcement officers, but it does involve many different military personnel. Over Super Bowl weekend of this year, 3 UFOs were shot down, and one was over Alaska, near Dead Horse, Alaska. And Ross Coulthard, the reporter, just broke a story where apparently there were more than 3 UFOs shot down. Now, this one apparently over Alaska, they won't release the video footage of it, won't release any pictures. They said They blasted it down. Couldn't recover it. Weather was too bad. They left. Nothing else, to it. So, by the way, this was all wrapped up with the Chinese spy balloon just a few days before getting shot down not far from CJ and myself near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So, what's your hot take? What should we make of spy balloons, UFOs getting shot down? There's one out there over Dead Horse, Alaska. Military's not talking. What's going on? What do we make of this?
Yeah, please do.
My take on it is this. Could it be spy balloons? Yes. Could it be something other than? Yes. The problem is everything that conveniently gets shot down seems to land in places where we can't go out and get to it. So isn't it convenient that when it crashes in a part of Alaska that the average person is most likely not going to get to? Or in your case, it crashed off the coast in the water. So now the government, here's the part that causes me to be conflicted. As a police officer, I took an oath to protect everybody. We want to keep people safe. Is it not more safe to shoot something down where it's going to not land on a schoolhouse full of children or a bus full of nuns? Yes. So we want it to crash in an area where it's going to land safely. But is that also not a very convenient excuse to make it be where the average person or the average investigator is not going to be able to see what it was that actually landed? Yes. And so that's where my personal take on this is I'm very conflicted, because it could be one or the other, and we do not have the ability to go forward and see it because the government's not going to tell us. Because let's face it, the government doesn't want to give control. They don't want. That's the one thing that everybody always asks about disclosure. I'm like, I don't know if we're ever going to get disclosure in our lifetime, and I'm sure that's going to make a lot of people mad. But the reality is governments like power. They don't want to give it up. If they have knowledge, knowledge is power. If I tell you, if I'm the government, do I really want to tell the people that, hey, there is a group of individuals that we have no control over that are flying over our military bases, over our civilian population, and we have absolutely no way of stopping them? That does not make me look powerful. So I at no point as a government am going to look at you and say, that's going to happen. No, I'm going to say that's a weather balloon or you're crazy. I'm not going to tell you what is really out there. And so when you talk about these, whether they're spy balloons or UFOs or whatever it was that were shot down, I don't know. I think it fits way too easily into all of these categories, because even if it isn't, even if it is some sort of spy balloon or some sort of either China or Russia or some other foreign power that wants to send something over there, that in and of itself, take the UFO completely out of the equation, that still doesn't look good as a government, that China or Russia or some other military or other country is flying stuff over our country and we're not stopping it.
Right.
Any way you look at it, that looks bad. So to me, their best way of covering it up is to say, well, hey, we shot it down. It's nothing. You can't get it. Let's just make sure it lands somewhere where nobody can get to it and see what it is.
That's it. I mean, happened at Roswell. I mean, we didn't shoot it down, but it crashed. Okay. It's a weather balloon. Don't worry about it. So these folks, did they actually, what they shot down, did it land to where, whether it's in the ocean or somewhere where a human cannot get to? We don't know. Is it a good possibility the military has recovered it and taken it to wherever for more testing? Again, there is no disclosure. They say, oh, we're doing disclosure. They're not doing disclosure. It'll be real interesting if in our lifetime that they ever come forward and tell us what really is going on, what happened in 1947 or the Phoenix Lights or what happened to the Super Bowl. I just don't. That my take of it, it's not going to happen.
And going back to where we talked about that tipping point with society, I think things would change if all of a sudden society on a whole started to believe things like this were real, or the possibility of them were real. I think we would see a lot further or a lot more motion towards true disclosure, because the government's going to look at it and go, well, hey, the majority of the people believe it's real. So if they already believe it, we've already lost. So until the majority of the people start believing it, they can still say, no, just feed them a line, feed them a line, feed them a line, because the majority of the people still think that this is crazy.
But
Right.
the only thing about that is look at all the movies, TV shows, all this, well, like Get Smart. They're already talking in their shoe or talking on their their wristwatch. They're doing it now. So I think a lot of the people already know this is out there. Just the TV shows, World, let's try it again. War of the Worlds. Back, what was that, in the 50s, 60s? That movie came out. And that was, so I think television and movies are already showing us, yes, the UFOs are there.
They're desensitizing us.
But, I think, to me, if the military just says, yep, this is happening, we have UFOs, I think people are going to go, well, it's about time you tell us. I don't think there's going to be hysteria. My thought is people are going to finally say, well, duh, we already know it's about time you come forward. But
Right. And friend of the show, Ryan Sprague, who does the Somewhere in the Skies podcast, he's actually putting together a group to go look for the Dead Horse, Alaska UFO. He has some insider information up there that said, hey, yeah, this thing was brought down and there's still parts of it out there. And, the government at first tried to blame it on a kid's Pico balloon, a recreational Pico balloon. We had the guy that basically made that Pico balloon on our show because nobody else did any digging into that theory whatsoever. And we essentially proved, I think, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it definitely was not a Pico balloon. Okay. And if it was, that's pretty scary that NORAD is scrambling jets to shoot down a kid's Pico balloon, which, by the way, anybody in the world could track on the internet as it circumnavigated the globe. Why does NORAD have to just now pick it up, really, and shoot it down? So we're not buying that. And something that still haunts me about the spy balloon, we know about this because of a dude in Montana who wouldn't give up on it. He saw something in the sky and he just hounded authorities until it was looked into. And if it hadn't been for dude, and I feel like this is an old Coors Light commercial. Here's to you, Mr. Dude in Montana, who wouldn't give up on the spy balloon, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't know about it. Think all the things we don't know about.
yeah.
I mean, there has to be hundreds, thousands, right, that we never know about, that we don't have a clue about. So I'm with you on disclosure too, because here's the fact of the matter. If an alien craft did come down Roswell, New Mexico, if we're reverse engineering alien technology, you're talking about the most important military secret in the history of the world. And do I believe the government is just going to be like, yep, here it is? No. It's not just the most important military secret, it's the most important secret in the history of humankind. And I don't think that secret's going to get out of the bag anytime soon. So it has been a pleasure having Marianne, Robb, and Dave Rich from the UAP-PD on with us tonight. I would love to send it to Smitty right now. Any final thoughts on the night from you, Smitty?
Thank you so much for being with us, and keep up the good work, and maybe more people come forward and tell their stories, and hopefully we can all come to a better understanding of what's going on.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
And we'd like to have you back again sometimes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That'd be great. Thank you.
That's for sure. And now I'd love to send it to Marianne. Dave, guys, could you tell everybody how to get in touch with you one more time? And then also your final thoughts on the evening with the UAP-PD.
Well, again, the way to contact us is on our website, UAP-PD.com. And again, there is a contact button. Please just click that button, contact us, give us your information. Also, our email address is uappolice@gmail.com. So please get with us. I thank you for allowing us to be on the show, getting our organization out there, and to people, police officers, law enforcement, and also first responders to know that we are there for them. There is an outlet. do not allow this stuff like Dave to just fluster inside of you, and it was eating him from basically the inside out. He was losing the sleep and being stressed. And we just we're so happy to have this organization to allow officers and first responders to share their story and just get it off their chest.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off of that, you're not alone. If you are a first responder who has experienced something that you cannot explain, you are not alone. We are here for you. We're here to listen to you. We're here to only go as far as you're willing to go. We will keep it confidential, but just remember, if you're sitting here and you're watching this and you're like, wow, I had something happen, but I just don't know if I can tell them. I just don't know if I feel comfortable. Trust us. We were willing to take a bullet for you when we were on the job. We're still willing to do it.
Yep.
Just come forward, give us a call, and talk to us. And like I said, we will only go as far as you're willing to go. But we want to give you that opportunity to start moving towards recovery, start moving towards feeling better, feeling more confident, and hopefully gaining some understanding.
Well said, Dave and Marianne. And my final thoughts for the evening on the UAP-PD is that you play a vital role, guys, in the public's job of playing a part in data collection and anomalous phenomenon. So, folks, all of us can get off these things right here, these screens, all right? The skies are not classified. The forest, most of them, some of them are not classified, but we can go out and go for a hike. We can watch the skies. You never know. One of us might be the ones reporting the next spy balloon. And organizations like the UAP-PD play a vital role in the public's and law enforcement's collection and disbursement of data. So thank you, guys.
Yeah.
And Smitty, if you could take us out for tonight.
Well, thank you again. Be happy, be strange, and listen to all things unexplained. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Like, share, follow, comment, subscribe, support. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, will save for closed session.